What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 63 of the Half Price Concessions podcast as we are talking Havens Family Racing with Mike and Jay Havens. Everybody in the racing world knows just how much of a family sport it is. This sport is passed down from grandfathers to sons to grandsons to great-grandsons, across cousins and uncles and you name it. And this is a little snippet of one of those stories of a three-generation team started by Richard Havens in Ridgeway, Virginia, down to his son Mike, Jay Havens, the third generation that did a lot of driving for the team, whereas Richard and Mike were more behind the scenes working on race cars, building race cars for drivers to take to the racetrack, to go get victories, to chase trophies. And this podcast is a piece of their story. It was very fortunate to be able to sit down with Jay and Mike and get Mike to kind of fill in some of the backstory on what got the team started and the origins and where it all kind of came from, the basis for it all. So glad to have you guys listening in. Make sure you hit the subscribe button on whatever podcast app you're using to listen to this podcast. If you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, Google Podcasts, YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button if you can. If you're on Apple, leave us a 5-star rating and review. It would help us out a bunch. Just hang tight with us. Got a few bills to pay. On the other side of these messages, Jay and Mike Havens from Havens Family Racing here on the Half Price Concessions podcast.
Planning on doing some digging in your yard? Your simple backyard project could quickly turn dangerous. Buried underground cables and lines are just inches below the surface, so don't forget to make one very important call to 811. Calling 811 is the first step in having your buried utilities marked so you know where it is safe to dig. 811 is free, it's fast, and it's the law. For digging projects big or small, make the call to 811.
The Half Price Concessions podcast cannot say thank you enough to Roger Johnson and the awesome folks at the Performance Center Racing Warehouse for all their support of our podcast and of local racing. If you are an asphalt racer and you need your front or rear clip fixed, Performance Center has some of the quickest turnarounds in the country. In the market for a new race car, the PRW chassis is a proven winner. You need something for your asphalt late model stock race car, you need to get in touch with Roger Johnson and Performance Center Racing Warehouse today. Make sure you check out their website. It's performancecenter.com. That's PERFORMANCENTER.com. You can also like them on Facebook at Performance Center Racing Warehouse and call them today at 704-838-1400.
Hey podcast listeners, I'm Keith Montgomery of Montgomery Performance Consulting, and I want to help speed up your racing program. Whether you're racing dirt, asphalt, or road course, put my years of experience to work for you. Our pull-down services will help find where you're giving up speed so you can unload faster and run up front. We also offer trackside consulting and data testing to help you find speed and balance. And with our central location in Burlington, North Carolina, you can come to us for discounted rates on pull-down sessions. Call me today at 336-382-1835. Like us on Facebook at Montgomery Performance Consulting, and let us help your racing program today.
In today's world, you need every advantage you can get when it comes to your personal business or your race car. Accelerated Graphics can help you make the best first impression possible by looking sharp. Whether it's embroidery on hats, t-shirts, or polos, trophies, decals, wraps for your race car, wraps for your commercial car, Accelerated Graphics and Jason Turner can help make that possible and help give you a good, clean, professional look that not only attracts new customers, but attracts everybody and their mother to want to see how sharp your vehicles look. Call Accelerated Graphics today at 336-266-5653. Visit worth2tenths.com or find Accelerated Graphics on Facebook and get a hold of Jason Turner today. Here on the Half Price Concessions podcast, and we are in Ridgeway, Virginia, talking about Havens Family Racing. We got Jay Havens to my left. I got Mike Havens to my right. I'm in a Havens sandwich. We got Williams in the middle. This is at least you save the fat meat for in the middle for sure, the way we're sitting. But what kind of helped, Jay, you and I have known each other for quite a while. And we've kind of spit around this idea of sharing stories and whatnot. And what really helped trigger this was you guys got to bring your granddaddy's old race car, one of his old race cars, out to Franklin County Speedway for when the Southern Modified Tour came, and they ran the Kenny Minter Classic. And I think you guys got to actually pace the field. I think it was y'all on another kind of classic car. So just to bring that thing out and have it as what a modified maybe used to look like compared to what they look like now. How cool was that for you on that thing? Because I think you were the one driving around in the pace laps, weren't you? No, that wasn't you.
Dad.
Oh, Mike got. All right, well, we're gonna save him for a minute. But what was that like for you? That had to be pretty cool, because I know you and Kenny's son are pretty close friends even to this day.
Yeah, when we got when we got up to Franklin County for the race, me and Dad had just originally planned on just going up there and, supporting Kenny Jr. And me and him have been friends for, my whole life basically. And me and Dad were just over looking at the car and reminiscing on, when my pops was building the car and getting everything squared away to actually race it with the Southern Vintage Modified Series. And then Chris pulled Dad aside and asked him to drive it. And, man, you would have thought that you'd have gave me and Dad both $1 million at one shot, because it was so cool to see the car that I watched my grandpa and my Nana spend so much time, blood, sweat, and tears in. To see it back out on the track, it was probably one of the most monumental memories that I'll have of that car.
Not to say. So, Mike, you were the one that was actually out there driving it. Obviously, you're older than Jay for obvious reasons. But, so you got a lot more time and wrapped up and a lot more memories. So, for you, what did that mean actually to have it out there pacing? Because, I mean, it's one thing if you're out there joy riding or just firing it up to hear it, but to have it out there and have it kind of pace around that, what was that like?
It was probably one of the most awesome moments at a racetrack I've ever had in my life. I mean, the deal with Chris asking me to drive the car for them, to pace the field with it, as much as my mom and dad both loved that car, I know they were both smiling down on me that day saying, yeah, this is the deal right here. This is what this car was meant to do.
Yeah, it wasn't just meant to sit still or nothing. But, so, I think it's one of the coolest things I love on these podcasts is just to tell stories and share stories that otherwise you wouldn't know, because hardly any of us in this level of racing, we don't write books, we don't go on Oprah Winfrey, we don't have access to, NASCAR Race Hub or none of these things like that. But I love hearing these stories. And obviously, Mike, your dad no longer here, passed away a few years ago, so we can't get his words. But for you, what was your earliest memory of your dad, Richard Havens, being involved in any kind of racing? Like how far back can you go in that? Can the hamster spin in the wheel, but so fast, I'm sure. But what's your earliest memory?
I would probably have to say I'm 55 now, so I was probably 6-7 years old, somewhere in that area. And Dad decided he wanted to build him a race car. He had been going. We went as a family all over the place, different tracks: Franklin County, 311, Oak Level, South Boston, you name it. And Dad just got the urge, he wanted to go race himself. So I remember, like I said, he brought home a 64, 65 Chevelle and built a dirt car out of it. Sitting there in the front yard, did a whole lot of this before he had the big garage behind the house. Just had a little bitty garage up under the carport, and he did everything just like we've done from day one. Build a car, build a chassis, build the motors, build everything right there at the house. And he ran dirt with it for, I'm going to guess, a couple of years with R.L. Young driving the car. And then he decided he wanted to go asphalt racing and start running the Late Model Sportsman Series.
I think it's a pretty big difference from the way it is today, because nowadays it seems like you go here and buy this, you go there and buy that, and it's a lot of, you have to put it together. But the way you're describing, and I read it as well online about your dad, is just how much y'all really did build. It wasn't a thing where you guys just went down to the store and bought a lot of this stuff, was it?
Oh, no, we did everything in-house. That was something Dad was a huge believer in. He always thought that if you're going to race, you've got to be smart enough to do this. You've got to be smart enough to weld. You've got to be smart enough building motors, paint the car, build the chassis, everything. The only thing that we actually went out to have done was machine work on the block, cylinder heads, stuff like that. Everything else from paint down, we did it.
Was he someone that came from like an automotive background? Was he
No.
a mechanic, or he was kind of learning this all on his own?
No, Dad was raised up where he drove a truck the majority of my life. He either drove trucks, owned trucks, either way. He had like a seventh grade education. There was no going to school to learn how to do mechanic work or anything like it. You just learn it on your own. And everything that he knew, 90% of it was probably self-taught.
That's just so cool. I love hearing that stuff, man, because it's hard to learn this stuff now. I feel like everything's got more complicated and everything's got more expensive. He came along, it seemed like, at a time where, like you said, if you had enough drive, and I'm sure through his trucking business he was footing the bill, obviously, as the owner, but it was at a time where you could go out there and learn that stuff. And
Yeah.
You talked about some of the guys that drove for him. Are there any other kind of big ones that were thrown in there? Any bigger names that might be known in short track racing?
Let's see. Well, dirt car, Ariel drove it. Ariel Young. Gerald Compton drove for him. Orville Reedy, Gary Price, Danny Doughton, Tim DeWiggins, Tommy Wood, Ricky C, Darrell Gwynn. I mean, it's a list and a half.
Yeah.
As you figure, Dad raced for, like I said, he started when I was probably 7 years old, and he raced up until 2012, 13, somewhere in that area.
Wow.
And had everybody from those guys I named to my brother Gwen, and even him driving a car.
Yeah. I'm about to say, I got a feeling we're going to unpack a lot with Jay.
You're going to have to go into another day probably with him.
Most likely. Was he a guy that, like, with his team, did they, like, run for championships, or did they just kind of run for trophies?
Trophy hunting more than anything.
Okay.
I mean, we run championships. We've done some championship stuff, especially with the Southern Vintage stuff, with the Vintage Modifieds. We've done championships at Ace, Orange County, and I think South Boston also.
Okay.
But a whole lot of it, like I said, was just trophy hunting. Just go here, go there.
Yeah. And Jay, it's kind of interesting to me with this whole deal that, you know, you being the youngest, being the third generation, and yet it sounds like, unless old Big Daddy over here can correct me, you did the most driving among the ones of you that had Havens as a last name, pretty much.
Yeah, when I actually started when I was about 15, 16 years old, and my uncle he drove for my pops for, I'd say, probably about 5 to 10 years, something like that. But once I started to show a little bit more interest in wanting to drive, Dad and Pops, they took me aside and pretty much told me, if you want to do this, you're going to have to learn from the moment we start building this thing to the moment it hits the track. You're going to know every nut and bolt, what we do, why we do it, how we do it. And I feel like as a kid growing up in a family like this, being able to learn from Pops, which, he, in my mind, he knew everything about race cars. Going down to my dad, I looked up to both of them, not only for help learning, but for advice when I'm on the track or right after a practice session or after a race. I could say, hey, did I do this right? Did I do this right? What did I do wrong? What can I do different? And it helped me to, I'm not going to say I was a great driver or anything to write home about, but, it helped me to progress in my driving career.
It's pretty cool stuff. Mike, what did your dad kind of stay at one level as far as like the cars and stuff? Or because I feel like the reason I ask is at that time you hear of a lot of guys who nowadays could never afford to move up to, like the old baby grand cars or Grand National cars, things like that. Nowadays you just can't do it because it's so expensive. But I feel like at the time when he was doing this, it was a little bit more of an affordable option. Did he ever kind of move up to any higher rank than just like these weekly tracks and whatnot?
No, about everything we ever did, he started off doing the late model sportsman deal, and then when it turned to bush, we ran everything from a mile track down, and that was still entailed just going on Saturday nights, Friday nights, Saturday nights, something like that, and that's all he wanted to do. He never really wanted to, I guess, push the issue to go further or to get bigger, because in his mind he was just doing it as a hobby, and he was still had a family to provide for, so he would get back in the truck Sunday, go up the road, do his job.
Yeah, so this was never at the point where he had like paid employees that just worked on race cars and nothing like that. This was pure Saturday night hobby, have fun.
Yep, exactly.
You remember what was the furthest you ever went with them, or kind of like the farthest you guys would go of any of these things? It sounds like, to be fair, y'all had a lot of tracks to choose from around here from back in that day. I know a lot of them have closed now, but you remember the furthest you guys ever went?
Did fairgrounds at Richmond, Kingsport, North Wilkesboro, Lanier, Georgia. Lanier was probably about the furthest we ever went.
Yeah, that's a good little haul.
Yeah.
What was Wilkesboro like?
Wilkesboro's awesome. It is still awesome to this day. I would love to see somebody reopen that place. Because, I mean, it's, even back in the day, it was fast. There's plenty of room for the cars, and it was always a great race there.
Now, Jay, with your racing, I know I used to see you always at like Ace and Caraway and stuff like that, but I never did ask you. Did you ever get to venture out by the time you finally came around?
No, not really. We when I started, we mainly focused on the tracks that were, I guess you could say, close to home. The furthest I ever went out was actually when I was taken out of a car. I started crew chiefing for James Turner. The furthest we went were places like Southern National or Langley and places like that. And then I've had a couple trips to Myrtle Beach helping out a couple different people. So as a driver, I normally stayed, I'd say, within an hour and a half of home normally.
So now, Mike, I got to ask you this, because I never got to have a conversation with your dad. What was he like kind of in the pits? Was he kind of Mr. Cool, Calm, Collective, or was he Mr. ready to drop him ready to throw him at the drop of a hat? Like, what kind of man was this guy? What was his racetrack demeanor like?
Dad was cool. He was cool under fire, no matter how you looked at it. But on the flip side of that, if it was time to throw down, we was gonna throw down.
You ain't got any of them stories you can share, do you?
Well, probably the worst one was at South Boston. We were running a vintage car when Ricky was driving the car for him. And when Darryl Gwynn was in the car, actually. We were running good enough to win the points. And there was a little issue on the track. And at the end of the race, we kind of had what is the cup officials want to call it? We had an altercation in Victory Lane.
About to say, I'm glad this is an important enough story.
Yeah,
so there wasn't no discussion. It turned into an altercation.
It turned into an altercation. That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
All right, now Jay, I'm gonna swing over to you because I think you're a little younger. You might give me another detail. Can you? He gave me the black and white outline. I need a little more paint by numbers. Can you give me something more?
With that quote unquote altercation, I remember it because it actually popped up on my Facebook memories the other day. We ran.
You know it's big when it's in your Facebook memories.
Yeah, we actually finished second that night, and there was some, I guess you can call it, jawing back and forth between two of the elder statesmen. I'll call it.
There you go.
And next thing you know, somebody got punched in the nose, and then next thing I know, I'm right in the dead middle of all of it. So, you know, our team, we had about, I'd say somewhere around 6 to 8 people, something like that. I remember one guy told Papa and Nana to get back to the trailer. We got this under control, and the next thing you know, there's punches thrown, words thrown. A couple people ended up with some bruises and some cuts, I guess you can say. So yeah, we it's just like Papa always told us. We show up as a team, we work as a team, and we have our teams back. And that night in particular proved what he meant by that.
I was about to say. Well, I mean, hey, you're gonna have that sometimes in racing. You're not always gonna. I think the only guy who never gets in a fight at a racetrack is probably the guy that runs last, because he ain't making nobody mad unless he wrecks the leader or something while he's getting lapped. So, hey, that's bound to happen. But do you remember? I know I've seen some of the articles and stuff. You guys were fortunate enough to have a lot of victories, and just walking through his basement at his house at one time, I was fortunate enough to do. I could just see just how a piece of the success that he had as an owner and you guys had as a team. Does any win in particular stick out to you, Mike, from when you were around with him? Something that he just kind of hung his hat on that he was really proud of, or anything in particular?
I would say the years were one of the vintage championships at Ace and Orange County. That was Dad's high point. For us to be able to win enough races at both tracks that year to win the points at both tracks that year, that really spoke very highly of how he ran things, of how Dad wanted everything done with the cars, how we did everything, and it was a very proud moment, not just for him, but for all of us.
Yeah. That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that and whatnot. So then, before I fully turn over to this guy, when Jaybird comes along, did you have any inclination he might want to drive, or did you want to steer him away, make him play football or baseball, something else? Like, what was your dad mindset when he came along?
I had never really thought anything about him driving, because up until he was early teens, he never really showed a whole lot of interest in it. He would go to the track with us, he would hang out in the garage some with us, but he never showed a whole lot of interest. He was more worried about playing baseball than he was anything else. And he came up to me, it was probably middle of the summer, about the time he got his driver's license. And he told me, he said, "Daddy, I want to try this. I want to try to drive some." And I told him, I said, "Well, there's only one way you're going to do this. You're going to have to work, help build the cars, help work on the cars, help do everything we do to the car to get it right to go." I said, "And on top of that, AB honor roll through school." I said, "You do that, next season rolls around, we'll discuss it." So he pulled his half of it, and he come home end of the year that year, AB honor roll, all that good stuff. And I told his mom, I said, "Well, I got to stand for my word. I told him we'd do it, so we're going to do it." So we built a 4-cylinder car, a little mini stock to go to Oak Level with. Took him up there and tried that out. That worked pretty good for a while, and then we decided we was going asphalt racing, so I built a limited car. Took him to Callaway with it, turned him loose up there. Done that for a little while, and a little vintage racing with him, a little late model racing, just a little bit of everything, really.
I'm about to say, now Jay, you and I texted about this earlier, because I was taking turns at work, because I had like 5 or 10 slow minutes, and I took turns Googling all three of you Havenses on the Google machine, and what popped up was this little white mini stock at Oak Level with a young, impressionable, trying to grow a mustache Jay Havens. You gotta share the Oak Level story, because apparently your Oak Level mini stock career started off good, and 3 races in, something happened.
Yeah, we that scrawny little guy, it was something else, man. When like Dad said, when I first wanted to start driving, he stood up to his part of the bargain, and we got this little Toyota Corolla chassis that we built, what me and him thought looked like a miniature dirt late model. Thought it was the coolest thing in the world. Had a couple good sponsors come in with us. First race, I'll never forget it. Started in the back, ended up finishing 6th out of like 18 or 20 cars, something like that. This is back when mini stock racing on dirt was, the cool show to watch. So I ended up running top 10 that night. And with each race, I got a little bit better. And the the end all to that one, I was trying to race a guy for the lead and ended up smoking up the entire track. Motor gave way on me trying to get the lead from a guy. It's my third or fourth race, something like that. And that ended my mini stock career real quick.
Man, how bad did you blow it? We talking like a hole out the side of the block blowing it, or how bad was it?
2 holes blown in the side of the block. when I come off turn 4, that little Toyota motor, I mean, pure out detonated. It was terrible. The only thing I think was still salvageable on that motor was the actual carburetor itself. Everything else was junked.
Is it true what they say? They run the best they're ever going to run right before they blow up?
Absolutely. That is by far the truest statement out of those little 4-cylinder motors.
I'm about to say. So, Mike, were your nerves okay watching him race, or was this a different level of? Were you like nowadays you got soccer moms that look like they're having a panic attack on the sideline when baby gets tripped up or tackled or hits the grass? What were you like watching him? Were you cool like your dad was, or were you a nervous wreck?
I wasn't as cool as Dad normally was, no. But I was pretty good. I was pretty cool about it. I mean, I knew we had built him a safe car. I knew that he was not going to get hurt in it. I was more worried about was he going to hurt the car.
Oh, okay. And apparently he did.
More than once. Way more than once.
Oh, there's more than once? Did you? Well, what was the other story? Where's the other one? Worse than blowing 2 holes in the motor?
Let's see. After the little dirt car, we built him a limited car sitting right here in the floor. We built it everything just like we always do. Took him to Callaway. He was running 3rd, 4th one night. They had a caution. He hollers at me on the radio, "Daddy, car's loose. Daddy, car's loose." I said, "I know. Just you got 3 or 4 laps to go. Just ride it out. Be happy where you're at. This is the age speaking wisdom." He says, "Okay." They get ready to throw the green. There he goes, trying to pass the guy in front of him. I hollered at him on the radio again. I said, "Just ease off of it. Just ride where you're at." He spins the car out, sticks it in the wall, runs the whole front end of the car. I mean, it's been a long time since I've seen somebody hit the wall as hard as he did.
Oh, jeez.
And the whole time I'm standing there, me and his brother standing on top of the trailer watching him. And I hollered at him on the radio. I said, "Jay, you all right? Jay, you all right?" And he says, "Yeah, I'm fine, Daddy." And I'm standing there leading his little brother, and I told him, I said, "Now, if he would have just listened."
Jay, what is your side of this story? What was going on from your perspective?
He's not wrong. He did tell me to back off, but me being the competitive person I am, I seen a shot at a podium finish, and I was going to take everything I could to try to get that podium. And the bump coming off turn 4 at Franklin County definitely got another victim that day. The hit I took, it was probably the hardest one in my whole racing career. But if it tells you anything, the piece of my hood that broke off in the wall lasted in the wall for about 10 years later.
Oh, it's still there. It's like a fossil.
Yeah, it definitely fossilized real quick. The worst part of all that is my mom was sitting in the stands with a lady that was sponsoring me, and I hit directly in front of them. So all I remember after I hit the wall was I finally came to and was able to talk to Dad on the radio for a second. I got out the car, and all I remember is my mama having one heck of a fit, man. She threatened the flagman, wanted to get down there on the track, and I just remember her hollering at me so much, just trying to get me to pay attention and know she was there. But I think my little noodle was scrambled pretty hard after that one.
About to say your egg was scrambled. Golly.
Yeah.
It's still, man, that's wild. So, Mike, one of the things I've heard, and we talked about this a little bit before we turned the recorder on, was all these different guys that drove for your dad's team and whatnot, and you working on it. Not a whole lot about you or your dad driving that much? Was it what was the extent of either of the two of you actually being behind the wheel and being out there on the racetrack?
Dad drove one race at Caraway when I was probably 10, 12 years old, something like that. The guy that was supposed to drive the car for him never showed up. And I remember sitting in the stands with Mom and my little brother, like everybody used to. All the white moms, kids stayed in the stands. Everybody was down there working on the car. And I remember sitting there in the stands, and I looked through the fence at the car when it came out on the track. And I remember thinking, that looks like Dad sitting in there. And I walked down to the fence and looked real close, and I run back over, told Mom, I said, Daddy's in the car. And he ran that one race. It was the only race he's ever run. And I've never run a race. I've practiced just about every car we've ever had, take them out, ride them around a little bit, see what it feels like, see if what I'm thinking the car is supposed to be doing, it's doing, and then I put whoever's driving it in it.
That baffles me, though, because it seems like, you guys put all this time in, obviously the money. I don't mean to insult you or nothing, but that kind of baffles me. I'd be a little more selfish. I'd be like, yeah, you damn right. I want to go drive this thing. Let me drive it. Like, do you understand where I'm coming from?
Oh,
This feels like a disconnect.
I do. I understand. I mean, you're not the first person that's ever said that to me. I guess I've always just I've gotten as much thrill out of being able to stand there and watch that car go off in the corner and know in my mind I made it do that. Instead of being the guy behind the wheel making it do it.
I can understand that. That's where I call it getting your payoff. That's where you got your payoff. You enjoyed that.
Exactly.
So now, Jay, obviously, I'm sure you kind of have that payoff, but you also know it a little more behind the wheel. So now that you don't drive as much, do you get a similar satisfaction with anybody you go help? I know you went to Bowman Gray earlier this year to, I think, help was it a Brandon Ward you went and helped? Zach Brewer, that's who it was. They all run together for me. But do you get that same thing, or since you've been a driver, do you still have that itch like, I bet I could get out there and I bet I could go out there and go just as good?
I'm not gonna lie, I do still have that mentality of, well, dang, if I was in that car, I'd have done this differently. But the same thrill that Dad's talking about, back when I first got injured back in the early 2010s, we had a couple guys that came and drove for us. I gained a whole new respect for people like my dad and my pops, seeing it from their aspect, being able to say, okay, hey, we just finished top 2, won the race, something like that, or, man, we just got the pole. We done great. The car done exactly what we designed it to do. We set it up to do it like that. And it's a whole different thrill, but it's still very rewarding.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So, Mike, I hate to say for historical context, I don't mean to make you sound older than you are. I ain't picking on you. But, so, what leads to kind of all this kind of winding down? Because obviously it got to a point where you guys you didn't race near as much as you did, way back, like you said, with you when it was kind of the heyday. What leads to everything kind of winding down a little bit?
Oh, Lord, probably age, kids, grandkids now, expense. It's unbelievable the difference in the expense of going to the racetrack now is what it was then. I mean, everybody that races now knows what tires cost, knows what gas costs, entry fees, and that's not even counting car costs. And there's not as many people that's wanting to go to the racetrack, I guess you could say, to work on cars what it used to. Because back in the day, in our I guess you could call it heyday, it was 6, 8, 10 people went to the racetrack every Saturday night with us. Now it's just people are getting away from it. It's not as many people wants to go racing on Saturday nights as it used to be.
I could see that. I'd be hard pressed to think of anybody that would be out there now doing what your dad did, owning a car just for the sake of putting somebody else in it and enjoying it. And now it's, somebody's either got some money behind them backing them, or
Yeah.
they're the one footing the bill. They want to drive their car. You don't see I don't see a lot of people like your dad kind of getting repeated in future generations.
No, it's not. Now it's more of a business. I mean, people are getting paid to work on the cars now. That's their Monday through Saturday job. And a whole lot of the guys driving now come with a big check in their pocket to go drive. They don't necessarily have to work on the car. They just show up with their helmet and their suit in hand and get in the car and drive it, and win, lose, tear it all to pieces, go home. They don't have to worry about it till the next time it goes to the racetrack. And that's taken a whole lot of the, I guess you say, old school racing out of it. That, and it's a whole lot of everybody just goes somewhere and buys speed now. It's not like it used to be where you build speed right there in the shop. Back in the day, you would use what you knew. You would trial and error different things. You might see something on somebody else's car. You're like, that would work good on my car. You would go home and make what this person had. And it's not any of that left anymore, hardly. It's very rare to see that anymore.
Jay, you can probably speak to more people in our age bracket that have somewhat seen the change, but even just in your time, I mean, I'm sure you piggyback off a lot of that, just how much you've seen it change as far as just the cost to even go racing or the desire to do it.
Absolutely, man. I back when I was a little kid growing up in the shop with my pops and dad and my uncle and everybody, we could load up a family of, like with us, a family of 4, just dad, mom, me, and Taylor, and go to the racetrack for $25, $30. Now it's $25 per person. That's just from the spectator side of it, and then from our side of it, if we could, like Dad said, build speed here off of something that we've seen working with somebody else. Now you've got to where you can send your car off to have somebody else set it up, or say, okay, well, you had it this way, but I'm going to change it and make it this way, so that way this is better. And you see people spending, $50,000 to $100,000 on just motors anymore. And back when I first started, spending, let's just say $5,000 to $8,000 on a race motor was huge. The first time that me and Dad put together a V8 motor for us, he told me, hey, this is going to cost us about, $3,500 to $5,000, and I'm like, holy crap, I'm working over here for like $8 an hour. How in the world am I going to save up to afford that? But now, if you take, let's just say $5,000, you can blow that in 30 minutes having somebody just look at your car now. So it's a huge difference just from when I was, let's just say 10, 12 years old to now I'm 32. Just in that 20-year range, it's been a huge, huge difference in it.
Yeah. What's a memory or two that you kind of hang on to personally from all this? Because I know, I'm sure many a picture hanging on the wall of this one over here in the lounge chair, or your papa. To put into words, what's a moment or two that you kind of go back to in your head, however many times a week or day it is, that you're just like, yeah, that was good times racing.
Man, I tell you what, the best memory that I've ever had, I was racing the Southern Ground Pounder division with the Chevelle that we modeled after my pop's very first race car. The car itself meant a lot to me, and being able to have the success that we had with it was always a huge, huge victory in my mind, whether we won or lost. But I would say probably the best moment that still plays in my mind every day was the next to last race I drove in that car. We just had lost my mom earlier that year, and we were at the season finale at Ace that year. And I started, I think, 3rd or 4th, something like that. Ended up making it to the lead, and then had some tire issue, and I'll be honest with you, it was partially my fault too.
You were like Cole Trickle. You wanted to run the laps the way you wanted, and
I did.
Harry didn't like the way the tires looked.
Yeah, for real. But after the race, I had a little on-track altercation with somebody, just driving in way over their head and hurting my car a little bit. But when I pulled back in the pits, we were actually pitted inside the track for this race. Probably my biggest memory that will always stick with me. My papa was the first person that got to the car, and I'm sitting in the car and I'm mad as all get out, ready to get out and fight somebody. And Papa leans his head over in the car and he says, "Son, you drove a great race." He said, "Be proud of what you done." He said, "You can't help what other people do to you on the track, but you have outdrove the car." And that's something that I always wanted to hear him say, is I was an actual better driver than what the car could handle that day. And that right there, it kind of solidified what I was trying to do with a racing career. Was, not only get out there and have fun, but I wanted to make my family proud. I wanted to put that number in victory lane. I wanted to put our name in victory lane. I never done it. Well, let me take it back. Part of it was for me, but a whole lot of it was for my family too. And being, at the time, I think I was maybe 25, 26 years old. That was probably one of the biggest memories and the greatest memories of being at the track with my pops. And, Dad too. He met me over there at the car and was super excited. I think we ended up finishing, second or third that race, something like that. But nothing will replace that feeling that I had when Pop stuck his head in the car and just kind of calmed me down off of jumping off a ledge I was about to.
That's pretty cool stuff. It's hard to end on a higher note than that, but I got one more character I need to see if either of y'all have got this is a podcast, this ain't radio, so if you want to let one fly, you can. Just remember my grandma's listening to this probably. James Turner. I know the two of you.
The legend himself.
Yeah, the legend himself from the Southern Ground Pounders, James Turner. God bless his heart, every time I saw James Turner, I don't know if he was happy, pissed off, a combination of the whatever, but I feel like I made a memory every time I seen him. You two have known him and been around him a lot longer than I have. I'll let either of you, if you got a story you want to share on him or something crazy anecdote, Pops, I'll let age go before beauty. If you got a James Turner story, I would love to hear this colorful character.
Oh, mercy. James is one of his own. He's probably one of the best friends I've ever had in my life. Super good guy. Just cool to be around all the time. He is a genuine, not only great guy, but he is the poster child for old school racing. Yeah. He really is. I mean, he does everything. He does 95% of everything that car himself. He drives it, hauls it to the track, works on it, you name it. That's all I know to say. He's just a super good guy all the way around.
Pops could be a politician over here. He's not giving me what I want. Jay, I think you're picking up what I'm putting down. Can you give me one made for podcast story?
Oh yeah, man. So when I first started helping James, he I'll be honest, like Dad was saying, he is a genuine great friend of mine. I wouldn't give nothing in the world for that man. He gave me a chance to drive his car a few races. We've had a lot of fun together. But I think the funniest time that we've been to the track with him, this was at Franklin County a couple years ago. He started on the pole, and I'm not going to name no names, but someone cut down across the front end of his car and ended up putting him in the wall. So I was over at his trailer watching him, and I told Dad, I said, we need to go over there and make sure that he don't do nothing stupid. I will never forget this as long as I live. That man jerked the front bumper off his car.
Didn't hook it to a tow strap. He ripped it off.
He just ripped the joker off. And he had all intentions of throwing this thing through somebody's car. he slid it across the track hoping they'd run over it. And he leaned in the car and he told me what he said. And, you know, I know this is a podcast, but there's words that I just can't say
that's
that he
okay.
said to him. But
Question his ancestry, maybe.
yeah, a little bit. And the rest of the night, he walked around with a lead pipe stuck down in his boot. And me and Dad had to basically walk everywhere with him to keep him from braining that guy. But it's like Dad was saying, man, I can't thank him enough for, you know, giving me the opportunity, number one, to help him out. He always called me his crew chief at the track and, you know, let me drive his car some. We took his Comet in here and revamped it a couple years ago, and just, he is what I refer to as just a genuine badass.
Yeah.
That's just the easiest way to say it for him.
Yeah. That's what I was hoping for. I wanted a good James Turner story, so I'm glad you facilitated. Pops, you got anything to add before I hit the stop button on this thing, or are you satisfied?
No, we're good. Just ready to go back next year.
I hear you. Well,
Do
Jay?
a little modified racing next year. Go do the 602 tour. New mod coming out this winter.
Oh, so you got something in the works. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Jay, anything you want to add since Pops over here drops news on me?
Hey, I'm just excited to go with the flow, and I'm planning on, if everything goes right with our baby that's due in February, I plan on making it to the track to help out not only Dad and them, but you never know, you might catch me out with James Turner again, or there's no telling where you'll find me at next year.
Thank you for listening to the Half Price Concessions podcast. Special thanks to Jay and Mike Havens for helping make today's episode possible, for taking time out of their busy day. They could have been doing absolutely anything, but they agreed, they met, they sat down and gave us a piece of their time and shared a piece of their story, and we sincerely say thanks for that. When our next episode comes out, we're really not quite sure. It's whenever the next time we get something recorded. We'll make sure and get it published, and we'll let you know. Make sure you hit the like button. If you find our Facebook page, just search for the Half Price Concessions Podcast. You can like us on Facebook. If you're on the podcast app listening to us, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, TuneIn, YouTube, whatever you're using, make sure you stay subscribed. That way it'll automatically pop up when we produce a new episode.